if you're here today, you're here to take this class, one of the 4 Buddhist basics class that's being taught by students of the temple. And this one is on taking refuge in the 3 jewels. There are 4 different classes that are required for taking refuge. We are going to be having a taking refuge ceremony in April. You all are welcome if you're interested in taking some of the precepts and taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. That if you've missed, this is the last of the 4 in the sequence. If you've missed any of them, don't worry. We're repeating them again next month and the month after. And somehow, by some weird divine intervention, the way the schedule goes, I'm teaching next weekend's class too. Double Min bow. We're starting over with the 4 Noble Truths on that one. So under the wise guidance of Venerable Jeff, I am going to be teaching you about the taking refuge in the 3 jewels. And if you are here, that means that you are either interested, perhaps you like this Buddha guy, he seems to be a good mentor and a model, and you're interested in learning more about him, or perhaps you want to hear some more of that Dharma, those messages from the Buddha, the teachings, and you just can't get enough and you want to learn more. Or you just love being in this group of like-minded people who love and cherish and support each other, the Sangha. Or you just want to see what crazy thing's going to come out of my mouth next, which really is the whole reason I'm here. Never know. But except for that 4th reason, these 3 are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and they're commonly referred to as the 3 jewels. What I'm going to talk about today to help us understand what taking refuge in these 3 jewels means is a story. I'm going to be telling a story, and this is a story from Buddha's life. Before we get into story time, and while we're getting ready for story time, as you see, I'm covered in love for my friend Greg, who's knitted. I've got my stuffies behind me. So I just encourage you all to get as comfortable as possible and get ready for story time. Comfy chair, blankie, your puppy, because this is going to be hopefully a soothing but enlightening experience, I hope. So the first thing I want you to do, though, before we start the story, is to hold the word refuge in your mind. It's a very big word, and taking refuge is a very specific ceremony. So we will be offering that in April. But what does taking refuge mean to you? I thought about that a lot. And for some folks, it might mean just finding safety. For some folks, it might be very extreme, like the whole, they're chasing me with pitchforks and burning torches, and I'm banging on the church door asking for sanctuary. Maybe that's a refuge to you. Or maybe it's just a place where you find knowledge and can move on with your life in a positive direction. I think, and this isn't official, but I have asked most of them, that if you ask most of the teachers in this room, why Buddhism? Why the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha? They would tell you that there was some really sad time in their life. There was a crisis. There was a time in their life where it just nothing made sense. And the Buddha was asked once when he walked a lot. And after his enlightenment, and he had his followers, he just walked from village to village to village. And someone asked him, how do you decide which village to go to? And he said, when there is someone so thirsty for my knowledge, for what I can teach them, so thirsty that nothing else quenches them and brings them solace, then I come. He says he felt it. And that's, I think, for me personally, and for other folks I've asked, that's kind of why Buddhism, to answer that question. In one of those moments when it felt like I just am miserable, and someone somewhere reached out a hand and said, just sit and just breathe. Try that for a minute. And something clicked in our brains, or we probably wouldn't be here, that just sitting and just breathing and letting ourselves, extracting ourselves from those emotions so that we can see them instead of being immersed in them, maybe we had a brief second of peace. And I know I've asked my teacher, Taizi, why Buddhism? Why the monk? Why did you do this? And he has said this, and he said this publicly too, is that it's the only thing I ever found that brought me true peace. And I feel the exact same way. So it's medicine for the soul. For some of us, it's a solace. And that for me is what refuge means. But refuge is a very personal thing. So that if you decide to take refuge, whether you join the ceremony or just personally you feel like you're pulled toward this, think about why. What does refuge mean to you, and why Buddhism? And with that, we're going to start a story. I've been so excited about this, I can't stand it. Okay. This is from the Buddha's life. This is from some of my favorite writings. This is from when the Buddha was before Buddha. This is from the Dhammapada, which is some writings that are my very, very favorite, because it's when the Buddha was trying to figure things out still. He was fairly young. He was in his 30s, I think, at that time. And he was still just trying to figure things out and understand what's going on. Why are we still suffering? He had gone into the mountains. He had left his wife and his child and his family and all the riches in the palace. And as you know, he had chanced upon old age, sickness, and death, and it really bothered him. So before he was Buddha, when he was still Shakyamuni, he went up into the mountains and lived in the caves and lived with the ascetics for many years, and starved himself of food and water, and denied himself adequate clothing and shelter, and just really went into the self-denial phase of asceticism to try to see if that would ease his suffering. And as many of you know, especially if you've listened to Old Path White Clouds, which this is largely drawn from, because Thich Nhat Hanh has a magical way of retelling the Buddha's life. And I highly recommend the Audible book. He almost died. I mean, we almost lost this beautiful soul who has become the Buddha, our historical Buddha. And he passed out he came down out of the mountains to try to find some sustenance because he wasn't feeling good, and he passed out. And a young girl from the village, who was the daughter of the chief, found him, Sujata, and she was bringing food and milk and water out to the forest to offer to the forest gods. And so she gave him the milk, and she brought him back to life, and they developed a relationship. She recognized quickly that he was something special, and he needed to be protected. He needed to be helped. So she offered to bring him food and milk every day, and because they could afford it. And he decided he was going to stay there in the forest, in this banyan forest with these trees, and try to figure things out while he regained his health. He was going to sit under some trees and meditate. So every day she was bringing him this food and this milk. So this is where we start our story. This is before Buddha became enlightened, before he sat under the tree and figured out the Four Noble Truths. This is him just trying to regain his health, and he's in confusion and still suffering, and has decided that he just needs to think about this for a bit, to sit and breathe. So our story starts, get your stuffies and everything ready. Everybody's ready? Okay. And Jack's right here sleeping, by the way. So if you hear snoring, that's him. He turned around and his nose is now closer to the microphone. So if he starts snoring, you might hear him. So our story, actually, Shakyamuni, the Buddha, who becomes the Buddha, is not the star of this story. This story is about an untouchable. This is the water buffalo boy, Savasti. He was 11 years old when his father died. His mother had already died. And he was an untouchable. And at that time, it was believed that people were born from various parts of Vishnu's body. And the higher part of the body that you were born from was the higher the caste. So the Brahmins were the highest, and they were the priests and all that. And then there was the kings and the rulers, and then all the way down to the feet, where those people were given jobs like street sweepers and stuff. But then there were the untouchables. And these were folks that were outside of the caste system. And they weren't even really allowed to live in the village. They had to go live in their own space. They weren't really given jobs. They had to sort of scrape by. They were called the untouchables because if someone of a higher caste, especially a Brahmin, touched one of them, which would not have been intentional because they would never do it intentionally, but accidentally brushed against them, or their cloak accidentally touched them as they walked by, they were considered polluted, and they would have to go and seclude themselves and fast for months to try to gain their to rid themselves of the pollution and become pure again. And the untouchable would be beaten. So the untouchables were treated very badly. And but Savasti was raised in this culture. And so although he was starting to think about that maybe the water buffalo were being treated better than him, because a Brahmin could touch a water buffalo and not be polluted, but couldn't touch Savasti. So he was starting to think these things, but he was a good boy, and he did not want, he worked very hard to not be touched by anyone because he never wanted to pollute anyone. So at 11 years old, he has a younger brother and two younger sisters, and one of them is a baby. They're parentless. So he becomes the head of the household, this 11-year-old boy. And he gets a job from a local rich man. He gets a job herding his water buffalo. And what that really meant was taking them out of the barn. And there was only, I think, 4. It was a very small group of water buffalo. And bring them down to the river the stream, so they could get some fresh water, find a safe place to walk them across the stream where there was better grass and let them graze out there. And then he would gather the kasala grass that was growing there and bring it back, put the water buffalo in at night, and give them the grass to eat. And it was an important job, but it was a job nobody else wants. So that's the kind of things that untouchables did. In return, he was given a little rice and some seasonings, enough to get his family by. But even more important, one of the water buffalo had a calf, so he was able to get milk. And that was how he saved and fed his baby sister. That's how she survived. So he was really taking care of his family, and it was a very important. And one day he's got his water buffalo, he's doing his thing, he's got them across the stream, they're peacefully grazing, he's gathering grass, and whoa, there's a man there. And this man is sitting in complete silence next to the stream, and he appears to be meditating. And he's beautiful. He's got fine features, he's very erect, he appears to be fairly tall, and Savasti's never seen this man, but he has a feeling this man is a higher caste for sure. So he's fascinated by what he's doing. So he stands and watches him. And this man stands up eventually, stretches his arms and his legs, and then begins to walk very slowly, walking just to walk, this very meditative walk up the stream bank. And at this point, Savasti still hasn't been seen, but he is fascinated by the fluidity of the movements, by the grace, by just the meditative slow feel of it. And then the man turns around and begins to walk the same way back, and he sees Savati. Well, Savasti knew that was fine, but we couldn't come much closer because he's an untouchable. And this man walks towards him and says, hello. And Savasti's backing up saying, hello, I'm Savasti. I'm tending these water buffalo here. And the man reaches out to touch him. And Savasti basically almost goes into the stream, the way some of the stories have been told. But he finally does touch him. And he puts his hand on his shoulder and he's like, I'm Shakyamuni. And Savasti says, sir, you can't touch me. I'm an untouchable. I will pollute you. And the man laughs and says, oh, that's not true. And Savasti said, yes, it is. I'm outside of the cat. You're now polluted. And he says, no, you are human. I am human. We are the same. The truth is the truth. And what you've been told is simply not true. Well, that was mind blowing. So Savasti lets the man touch him, feels his heart just fill with love and joy, because this is the first time someone's really touched him like that. And he's fascinated by him. And he asks him, what are you doing here? And in the Buddha and the Shakyamuni explains, this is what I'm doing. I'm sitting here trying to figure things out. And after he told his story, Savasti really felt connected with him and compelled. And he says, I wish I had something to give you. And I don't have anything. I just am here with these buffalo, water buffalo. And Shakyamuni said, actually, the grass that you've gathered for the water buffalo, I would love that because that would make a great meditation seat for me when I go back under the trees. Could I have that? And of course, yes, you can have this grass. I can pick more. And Shakyamuni said, that's wonderful. I'm going to walk back up this path and I'm going to go sit under a tree for a while. But if you'd like to come back tomorrow, I'd like to see you again. And Savasi's just overwhelmed. This is an experience like none other. This is pretty outside of the norm for him. And he says, yes, he would love to. And goodbye. And the man walks into the forest, and Shakyamuni takes his water buffalo back and puts them away in the barn with some fresh new grass he picked. And he tells his little family what happened. And he's like, this was unreal. He touched me, and the way he talked. And at that moment, Savasti clicked with the Buddha who's going to be the Buddha, and realized that this was a mentor and a man who speaks the truth and who has figured something out that maybe the rest of his world hasn't figured out yet. He's revolutionary, but it felt so right that I believe in you. I'm going to devote to you. And this is the man that I want to follow. I want to hear more from this man. So then the next morning, he has his coarse brown rice wrapped in a banana leaf, his lunch bag, takes his water buffalo over, and the man's not there. But he thinks, I really want to go see him again. So he leaves his water buffalo grazing and he goes along the path and he enters into a little clearing, and there's Shakyamuni sitting under a tree with Sujata, the young girl who had saved his life and brings him food every day. Whoa, that's another highborn. She's in a beautiful sari. She's delicate featured. She's a very obviously royalty. And he's a little stymied at this point. And Shakyamuni looks up and was like, oh, Savasti, come join us. And the girl wiggles over and offers a seat right next to her. So Savasti, who's already decided that this man is someone that he wants to follow, that he is dedicated to this man, just trusts and sits down next to Sujata. And then Shakyamuni says, we're about to have lunch. So would you like to join us? And they were unwrapping this beautiful white rice, fragrant with seasonings. Seasonings were very important back then, and really only rich people had them. And so all of the seasonings, it was just beautiful. And he says, we could probably make this. Are you hungry? And Savasti says, oh, I brought my own lunch. And he brings out his banana leaf and unwraps his plain brown rice. And the Buddha says, well, let's put these foods together and then we can share. Savasti was embarrassed because this coarse brown rice is nothing like the fragrant jasmine rice they had, but trusts in this man, so gave him his rice. The Buddha mixed it together, divided it out, and they all were eating. And this was just so unreal to be sitting with these two obviously higher born people eating lunch mixed with his brown rice mixed with their beautiful rice. And at one point the Buddha said, Sujata, have you tasted this brown rice that Savasti brought? It's delicious. And so they all agreed, they shared, they ate. And this was a new experience for Sujata too. This was some teaching for her too, to be eating with an untouchable. And then when they were done, the Buddha asked Sujata for the water, but they only had one cup that they'd been sharing back and forth. And the Buddha said, no mind, pour the water. He poured the water, and then he gave the water cup to Savasti first, the untouchable. And again, he's put his faith in this man, so he drank. And then gave the cup back. And the Buddha poured more water in it, and then he drank. And that was mind-blowing for both Savasti and Sujata for different reasons. I couldn't believe it, like, whoa, we're all sharing water with an untouchable. Then the Buddha fills it back up and gives it to Sujata, who decides that she's going to drink too. And after she drank, she didn't feel polluted at all. So this was just this teaching that the Buddha was doing through sharing, not even with words yet, that we are all the same. This whole concept you've been told about this person can be touched and this one can't, and this one's poisonous and this one's pure, is not true. It's simply not true. And this was really the first teaching that Savasti, the water buffalo boy, got. He got it the day before, and now he got it again. And it's really sinking in that this Dhamma, this teaching that he's getting from this man, is right. And he wants more. So he continued to sit there, and the Buddha told stories to them both. So they were really, actually, the Buddha's first, even before he was Buddha, he had a couple of disciples, and his first disciples were children. His first Sangha was children. And the story goes on that more children came, and he told more stories throughout the days. But finally, it was time for him to go. And Savasti wanted to join him, even though he's 11 and he needs to take care of his family. He wants to follow this man and learn more of his teachings. He has signed on. And the Buddha said, no, not now, but in 10 years, I'll be back. And he was gone. And now this was before, again, this is when he was known as teacher Shakyamuni. He wasn't the Buddha. He hadn't sat under the tree yet and learned the Four Noble Truths. He was still trying to figure things out, but he'd regained his health and he left. So of course, it really affected Savasti. And he spent the next 10 years taking care of his family, working the water buffaloes, but just letting that concept of what I've been taught my whole life is not true. And that we really are touchable. We really are all just human beings made of the same thing. So 10 years go by and the Buddha comes back. He kept his promise. Shakyamuni's 21. The family's grown up. They've grown up healthy thanks to his hard work, and all of their hard work together, they raised themselves. And the Buddha was the Buddha at this time. He had become enlightened. He had discovered the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. He'd been teaching. He had followers. His own son had joined him. He had a cousin. I mean, he had a gang of followers that were coming. And he meets Savasti at the watering hole and says he'd like to come see his family. And Savasti was a little embarrassed because they live in this small hut, but he brought them in. And there's one cute story about how the Buddha came in and he had to duck. I think the Buddha was very tall. He was very tall, but they fit a few of them in there, but they all can't come in, and they come in and they talk. And he says he basically meets them all. He holds the young girl. He says, what a wonderful family you have here. Are you ready? Do you want to still come with me? And it was a hard decision for Savasti. He loved his family, but he had already signed on with the man, Shakyamuni. He had heard the teachings and he wanted more. And now he wanted to go. He wanted to join this group of like-minded people, this Sangha, and learn from the Buddha, learn some more of those teachings. But yet his family, he had responsibility and he loved them too. And it really was his brother and his sisters who finally said, just go. We know we've been listening for 10 years about how this has impacted you. This obviously is a beautiful person and beautiful people following him. Just go, we'll be fine. And Savasti left and he joined them. And the stories say that it was hard for him, although the Sangha was extremely loving and supportive and accepting, for Savasti, it was hard because he still was raised that he's untouchable. None of these other people are untouchable. He was the first untouchable brought in. So he felt very outside, even though they weren't treating him that way. So it took a while. He was taken under Ananda's wing and under several of the disciples' wings, even the Buddha's son. They became very close friends because his son had joined him. And so the water buffalo boy became a monk. He went through taking refuge. They shaved his head. He was given robe and a bowl, and it was all so new to him. And it took but he recognized, although it might take years for him to finally feel a part of this group, that this group was there for him. So they were his new family. They were his Sangha. He became one of the Buddha's most devoted disciples. And there are stories that go on that mention him and mention how people are shocked. He's used as an example of Buddha's revolutionary ideas of how can you ordain an untouchable. He was used as an example when women wanted to be ordained, like, you ordain untouchables, you can ordain us. So he was a big, big deal. So there were a couple of really prominent people in this story. The other big person in this story who influenced Buddhism as we know it is Sujata, the little girl who saved him. So these two children are extremely important to our historical Buddha and to Buddhism as we are experiencing it now. And I love to think of those two. I think these stories are some of my favorite stories when Shakyamuni was just trying to figure it out. And I think for me, I think you can see in these stories the moment when Savasti, the water boy, water buffalo boy, when he took refuge in the Buddha, and then in his teachings, the Dharma, and then in the Sangha. And for me, that story, when I've listened to it so many times now, and it just struck me how that's such a wonderful example of what taking refuge in Buddhism is. We're taking refuge in, and whatever refuge means to you, we're devoting ourselves to the man, the Buddha, this enlightened being who shucked the system and said, I'm not going to go into the whole Vishnu and how many forest gods you have or whatever. This is something that can actually relieve your suffering. And that is his teachings. That's the Dharma. And so we want more of that Dharma. We believe that Dharma is beneficial to us. But as a solo practitioner, I don't think the experience is nearly the same as when you have a Sangha. And the Buddha said, find like-minded people like yourself. Hang out with like-minded people who are working the same way you're working, who are moving around through the world the same way you're moving, have some of the same belief systems, and support and love each other. So those are the three jewels: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And the ceremony that we're offering in April is taking refuge in those three things. And there are some precepts that you can accept into your life if you want to. The requisites for taking that ceremony are the 4 classes that are being offered and taught by all the students. They rotate every month. If you've missed a class, don't worry, you'll have an opportunity to take it in the next couple months. They're every month, one of these classes is offered. But I recommend taking the same class twice, because you're going to get a different teacher. And we're all going to have different viewpoints on what these things are and different nuggets of wisdom. We've had different mentors mentoring us. So definitely think about taking the same class twice. And then Reverend Valerie, if you reach out to her, she has a lovely, she's all got it written out, what else you need to do. It involves connecting with one of the teachers, one of the monks. We currently don't have any teaching nuns, but reach out to one of the monks and spend a little bit of time chatting with them. And then you'd be welcome to come join us. It doesn't make you don't have to shave your head. It doesn't make you a reverend or a monk or a nun. It's just saying that these 3 things, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, are really important. And I want to find refuge, find solace in those 3 things. And that is my talk for the day. So I hope that I know that Tycho's in chat put something in the chat to me and I missed it, so maybe I made a mistake, but I would love some feedback and any questions or comments that you might have. Oh, and also Reverend Scott said the classes will be on YouTube. Whoa, I'm going to be on YouTube. Okay, tell me what I did wrong now so that people get
Good job, Min Bao, good job.
Does anybody have any comments about that or how you felt about that? Oh, I love all the clapping hands.
I think you did a wonderful job, Minh Bao. And one of the things that you touched on many times, and I want to kind of use a different term, because a lot of people don't recognize that what was happening was Savasi's trust in the Buddha and trust in the teaching and trust in the Dharma or in the Sangha is faith. He had faith in the Buddha because the Buddha was a living example who showed what you could be like. And it was his example, being a living example, that gave him the faith, right? And then the teaching was what followed with that, and he had faith in that teaching, and then ultimately he gained faith in the Sangha as the supporting structure of Buddhism. And that is where faith is in the Buddhist tradition.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yes, thank you so much. Faith. I love that word, faith. Yes. Anyone else?
Min Bao, that was absolutely beautiful storytelling. And I was just mesmerized. And I'm 3/4 of the way through the book, and the way you told it is just absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. This story is in the very beginning of the book. It's turned around. It starts with Savasti already in the Sangha, and then the story gets told of how he's met. So it's the first few chapters, and it's really lovely. The whole book is amazing. Definitely recommend the audiobook too. Thank you, everyone. I hope that some of you do decide to join us in the ceremony in April. It'll be fun.
And Bao, I think you told it better than the book. It was really, really good. You added a lot of personal aspects, but I really think it was better, especially the way you expressed yourself. So thank you.
You
were so very animated. I just enjoyed it. In Buddhist countries, the tradition is to have very animated tellers tell these wonderful stories. And it puts us all in our child place where we get to go hear a wise person share these stories. And I felt like I was 5 just enjoying this great excitement. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Min Bao, I remember reading this story, and you really made it come alive. And I think another part of the faith piece is that that the water buffalo boy had to have faith in himself. He was taking a great risk. And I remember reading part of the story is that he had to go back and get more grass because he gave his first batch to Shakyamuni. So he was late getting his water buffalo back. And so I think he was questioned by the person he was working for. And so he knew that he was taking a risk making the decisions that he'd made, but he felt such a strong connection with this person that he'd met that he was willing to take that risk, and he had faith in himself too. So I think that's another part of the story that's intriguing.
I love that. Thank you, Maitri. He was a very brave boy, wasn't he? He was becoming enlightened at 11, and he was very brave. Yeah, those were some brave children. It's amazing to me too that it takes that children were the first ones to understand the Buddha's teachings. The children were open-minded enough to see that maybe there was some other truth out there.
Isn't there a passage in the Bible about that, about children being the leaders?
I think so. I haven't obviously I'm not a Christian and never have been, but for those of you in the room, yeah, I think we hear that a lot, and we see it today. That children are open-minded enough to think maybe another paradigm is true. Yeah. Anyone else? Gosh, these are great comments. And thank you for the lovely comments in the chat.
Kozin here, please do attend the classes again and again. Each person will have their own variation of what it means and how it works. And I just feel like I just had a nice bowl of soup with really rich seasoning in it myself. So let's do some more. I think Reverend Emily's going to give some, and Reverend Scott, I hope, will give one. And Reverends Valerie and Jean-Luc will keep up their good work with this stuff. So good job. Min Bao, would you like to offer merit?
Yes. May the merit of this penetrate in all being. Shoot.
in each thing,
May the merit of this penetrate into all things,
into each thing and all. Go ahead.
Think
Just do whatever you do is fine.
so that we and all sentient beings can realize the Buddha's way. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, Mahaprajna Paramita. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa.